modern institutions, I mean, everything from the sprawling campuses of legacy universities to the closed doors of family courts, all the way up to corporate boardrooms, have they just been entirely captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies?
Right. That is the massive question we are tackling today.
Yeah, and if that capture is really complete and total, what exactly is the average man supposed to do about it? Like, do you just roll over? Or do you completely detach and build your own parallel society?
This is a pretty stark choice.
It really is. So, welcome to a massive, ultra-long edition of The Deep Dive. We are talking to a very specific audience today.
Absolutely.
If you are a listener who is already interested in the men's rights movement, if you follow the manosphere, or if you view the world through a red pill perspective, you're going to want to pull up a chair, put your phone on, do not disturb, and just lock in.
Yeah, you will definitely want to pay attention to this one. The mission of this deep dive today is to rigorously and frankly impartially unpack the arguments presented in a highly provocative new text.
Oh, provocative is an understatement.
For sure. We are going to examine the author's view on the history of our institutions before he claims they were culturally, captured. We'll look at his uncompromising diagnosis of the state of modern masculinity, and then we are going to walk step by step through what is essentially a tactical war manual that he provides for men trying to navigate this whole landscape.
Right. But before we even open the book, we really need to set the ground rules for how we are approaching this material.
Yes. A crucial disclaimer for everyone listening right now, because this text contains heavily politically charged content. I mean, it touches on left-wing and right-wing ideologies, intense gender politics, cultural flashpoints. We must make one thing absolutely clear to you.
Hear us on this.
We are taking no sides today. None. We are not endorsing the viewpoints, the political stances, or the claims made by the author. Our job is strictly to report impartially on the content provided in the source material.
Exactly. We are just conveying the ideas exactly as they're presented in the text so you can fully understand the arguments that are driving this specific, highly influential corner of the cultural conversation.
Right. We are just the messengers here.
And what a conversation it is. So, the book we are looking at is called Escaping the Doom Loop, Mastering Resilience and Regaining Control by Conrad Riker, and it was published in 2025.
A very recent text.
Very recent. And look, I'm just going to tell you right out of the gate, this is a text you will absolutely want to buy and read for yourself to get the full, unvarnished experience.
Oh, definitely. We are going to cover a ton of ground today, but nothing beats reading the raw source material yourself.
So do yourself a favor, check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to purchase the book right now, and make sure you go follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack for his ongoing updates.
Yeah, his Substack is highly active.
It is. Finally, I urgently need to ask you to like and subscribe to our show. Your support is literally the engine that allows us to keep doing these extensive, unfiltered deep dives into the books shaping our world.
So please hit that button.
All right, let's get into it. To understand anything Riker is arguing, we first have to understand the architectural foundation of his worldview, right?
Yeah, he calls it the doom loop.
The doom loop. It sounds ominous.
It is. He paints this incredibly bleak, systemic picture of the modern male experience. The core premise here isn't just that modern society somehow misunderstands men or that it has, left them behind by accident.
Look, it's not a mistake to him.
Not at all. He posits that modern society actively, structurally hates them.
Hates them. Wow, and he defines this doom loop as an extractive mechanism.
Extractive is the perfect word for it.
Like, listening to this, it sounds like he views society as a machine that wants to harvest the fruits of male labor, right? Like the infrastructure, the tax dollars, the physical protection.
The heavy lifting, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, but it wants all that while simultaneously pathologizing the very biological drive that makes that labor possible in the first place.
Exactly. He says society labels a man's natural competitive drive as toxic masculinity, but then it turns around and demands that those exact same men bleed themselves dry for ungrateful bosses, bloated bureaucracies, and systems that offer them absolutely zero respect or authority in return.
So you are drained of your resources and demonized for your nature. That is the doom loop.
That dual reality, the extraction and demonization, is traced entirely back to biology in the text.
Right, he leans heavily into biology.
Oh, completely. Riker's completely dismissive of the contemporary sociological consensus that gender is a social construct.
He doesn't buy that at all.
Not for a second. For him, it is an immutable biochemical reality. It comes down to one thing: testosterone.
The big T.
Yeah, the book argues that testosterone is not some problematic evolutionary leftover. It is the literal reason men are alive.
He says evolution didn't wire men to be passive consumers or like empathetic mediators.
No, he says it hardwired them to lead, to fight, and to build.
Oh, build. And he builds this massive historical contrast to hammer that point home.
He really does. He looks back at history and sees men harnessing this exact biological drive, this testosterone-fueled imperative, to achieve monumental feats of engineering and survival.
Like the Roman centurions.
Exactly. He writes about Roman centurions building aqueducts that still stand today.
Right, thousands of years later.
Oh, yeah. And then he talks about World War II veterans. He points out these guys were essentially kids using raw trigonometry under heavy artillery fire to storm the beaches of Normandy.
It's an intense image.
It is. And the contrast he draws with the modern era is intentionally jarring. He looked at those historical conquerors, those builders of civilization, and then he basically holds a mirror up to the modern man.
And he doesn't like what he sees in the mirror.
Not at all. Riker argues that today's men are being systemically weakened. He uses intense phrases.
Like chemically castrated.
Yeah, chemically castrated by microplastics and soy diets.
So instead of conquering frontiers or building empires, he's describing a generation of men who are just sitting in climate-controlled rooms.
Right, praying for government handouts or addicted to hyper-stimulating video games or just doom-scrolling their lives away on OnlyFans.
It's a brutal juxtaposition. And he grounds this entire perspective in the concept of hierarchy.
Hierarchy is central to this whole thing.
Yeah, and for the audience listening who is familiar with Red Pill literature, the focus on hierarchy isn't new. But Riker leans very heavily into evolutionary psychology to argue that these hierarchies aren't oppressive social structures imposed by some patriarchal conspiracy.
Right, he doesn't see them as man-made oppression.
He argues they are natural, inescapable biological algorithms.
And he brings in Jordan Peterson's famous analogy of the lobsters to illustrate this.
Oh, the lobsters. You have to explain the lobsters.
So the core idea there is that even in crustaceans, which diverged from our evolutionary tree hundreds of millions of years ago, there are dominance hierarchies that are governed by serotonin.
Just basic brain chemistry.
Exactly. When two lobsters fight for territory, the winner experiences a massive surge in serotonin. They literally stretch out, they look physically larger, and they strut around ready to take on the next challenge.
And the loser.
The loser's serotonin just plummets. They curl up, they slink away, and they completely avoid confrontation.
So Riker is saying this biochemical reality of winning and losing, of dominating and submitting, is hardwired into the nervous system of all living creatures, including human men.
That is exactly his point. And he doesn't just leave it at crustaceans either. He scales it up to human data.
Executive data, right?
Yeah. He cites a Harvard Medical School claim that male executives, the guys sitting at the absolute top of the corporate food chain, have 20% higher testosterone levels than their unemployed peers.
Wow, 20% is a big jump.
It is. So he's taking that data and arguing that the men at the apex of society aren't there because of arbitrary societal privilege or systemic bias.
They're there because their biochemistry is literally driving them to dominate their environment?
Yes.
Yeah.
Their physical makeup demands that they climb the hierarchy.
So if we pull back and look at the macro thesis of this section, it basically funnels directly into their old internet adage that weak men create hard times, doesn't it?
Oh, entirely. Riker uses the fall of the Roman Empire to mechanically illustrate how this happens.
How does he frame that? Because usually you hear it was overexpansion or moral decay.
Right, the traditional narrative. But Riker takes a very specific angle here.
Yeah.
He argues that Rome didn't collapse because its legions were too toxic or overly masculine.
Right.
He says it collapsed because the elites became comfortable and embraced decadence. They basically outsourced their biological imperative.
What does he mean by outsourced?
He means they replaced their citizen soldiers with paid mercenaries because the actual citizens just no longer wanted to fight. And he mentions they banned gladiator games to appease moralists who found the violence offensive.
Oh, so they sanitize their culture.
Exactly. In Riker's view, they systematically regulated away their own warrior spirit. And when the barbarians arrived at the gates, there were literally no actual men left to defend the walls.
Wow. So applying that to today, it really sounds like he views modern culture as a domestication process.
Domestication is a great way to describe his view.
It makes me think of an analogy. It's like turning wolves into pugs.
Wolves into pugs. I like that.
Right. You take this apex predator that is built to hunt, survive freezing temperatures, thrive in the wild, And over generations, you breed it for compliance.
Yes.
You breed it to sit on a couch, to look non-threatening, to beg for treats, and eventually you end up with a creature that can barely breathe properly without medical intervention.
That perfectly encapsulates his argument about modern men.
But reading this, I kept wondering something. Does he ever grapple with the counter-argument?
Which counter-argument?
Well, does he address the idea that modern, hyper-complex societies, I'm talking global supply chains, nuclear treaties, digital economies, might actually require high-level collaboration, empathy, and diplomatic compromise over primal physical dominance just to function?
Well, he does anticipate that argument, but he explicitly rejects the premise.
He rejects it.
Yeah. He doesn't believe that a functioning society requires what he views as soft, feminized collaboration.
So how does he prove that?
He looks at anthropological examples of societies that actually attempted to organize around collaboration rather than male ambition.
Okay, what's his example?
He brings up the Mizuho tribe. It's a pretty well-known example in anthropological circles, often described as a matriarchal or matrilineal society.
Right, I've heard of them.
So according to Riker's analysis, for 3 generations, the women in this tribe held the structural power. They managed the households and the resources, while the men were basically relegated to basic tasks like fishing and babysitting.
Okay, so a total role reversal.
Right.
And what was his conclusion about the outcome of that structure?
Riker claims the result was a total collapse of ambition and progress.
Really? A total collapse?
Yeah, he points out that under this collaborative matriarchal model, there were no plows invented, no advanced infrastructure built, no drive to expand or build beyond, just the necessities of the next harvest.
Wow.
So for Riker, the demand for modern empathy and collaboration in corporate or social environments is not a genuine requirement for a complex society.
What is it then?
He views it as a covert, highly effective mechanism to neuter male ambition and maintain a domesticated workforce.
So they don't want you building empires, they just want you answering emails and not making a fuss.
Exactly. And to give a clear picture of what undomesticated primal ambition looks like when it's allowed to thrive in the modern world, he points to a very specific cultural icon.
Oh, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Yes, The Rock.
The contrast he sets up here is incredibly deliberate.
Very much so.
He writes that while progressive activists with blue hair are logging onto Twitter at noon to complain about the patriarchal harms of toxic masculinity, Dwayne Johnson has already been awake for 8 hours.
8 hours?
Yeah, he's in a warehouse gym deadlifting the equivalent of a Jeep. He's consuming massive amounts of steak to fuel his muscle growth.
He is operating with what Riker calls primal discipline.
Primal discipline. And the key takeaway Riker really wants the reader to grasp here is that Dwayne Johnson didn't achieve his massive status by using mindfulness meditation apps.
Right, or waking up to gentle acoustic alarms.
No. He achieved it by tapping into the exact same hormonal biological furnace that allowed prehistoric men to drag megafauna back to the fire.
That's a vivid image.
It is. It's raw, unapologetic, physical drive channeled into modern success.
Which brings a deeply uncomfortable question right to the doorstep of the listener.
Okay, let's have it.
If you are listening to this right now, whether you are on your commute, sitting at a desk, or just going about your day, this section of the book is designed to force an audit of your routine.
He wants you to look in the mirror.
Riker is demanding you look at your habits. Are you stuck in that passive consumption loop? Are you trading your evolutionary birthright, the capacity to build, to dominate, to conquer, for the comfort of a glowing screen and a soft couch?
He isn't asking politely either.
No. He is demanding his readers snap out of their chemically induced lethargy.
And look, if his views on biology and the domestication of men seem intense, that is really just the baseline.
Yeah, that's just the warm-up.
This sets the stage for what he sees happening in the legal system, because this is where the book goes completely on the offensive.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to dive into his analysis of what he terms the marriage trap, the fallout of the hashtag #MeToo movement, and what he characterizes as the absolute death of due process for men.
This is undoubtedly the most legally, socially, and politically contentious part of the entire text.
Without a doubt.
Riker looks at the modern institution of marriage and completely deconstructs the romantic ideal. He does not view it as a partnership of equals.
What does he call it?
He frames modern, legally binding marriage as a marriage plantation.
A plantation? Wow, that is a heavy, heavy term.
Extremely heavy. His central argument is that men who sign a marriage contract are essentially volunteering to be legally enslaved by a family court system that despises them.
But he doesn't just make the claim, right? He brings aggressive statistical data to back it up.
He does. He cites a 2022 Forbes report noting that women initiate approximately 80% of all divorces.
80%.
Yeah. And then he layers that with U.S. Census Bureau data from 2023, showing that a staggering 85% of all alimony payers are men.
So when Riker looks at those two data points, his conclusion is absolute.
Right, he says the family court system is entirely rigged. He views it as an institutional apparatus designed to facilitate a massive state-sponsored wealth transfer from men to women.
Effectively rewarding women financially for breaking up the family unit.
That's his argument. And to understand the mechanics of why he believes this system functions this way, we have to explore how he applies the concept of hypergamy.
Okay, hypergamy. Now, as anyone familiar with red pill literature knows, hypergamy is absolutely central to this worldview.
It's a core tenet.
It's the evolutionary psychology premise that women are hardwired to constantly seek out partners with greater resources, higher social status, and better physical protection, right?
Exactly. Essentially, the theory posits that women are biologically driven to continually upgrade their provider if a better option presents itself.
But what makes Riker's take on this so interesting is how he applies that biological concept to modern legal mechanics.
Yes. Riker argues that in the past, societal norms and the strictures of fault-based divorce kept this hypergamous instinct in check.
Like you couldn't just leave without a really good reason.
Right. But today, he believes modern legal systems, specifically the advent of no-fault divorce, combined with mandatory alimony and child support guidelines, artificially subsidize this biological impulse.
Subsidize it. So, in Riker's view, the state has stepped in to act as a surrogate, invincible husband.
That's exactly how he puts it. The state guarantees a woman's financial security, using the threat of police force to extract resources from the ex-husband so that she can execute her hypergamous instincts and leave a marriage without facing any financial consequence.
And this happens entirely at the detriment of the man who built the wealth.
According to the book, yes.
And he illustrates this dynamic with some genuinely jarring, visceral anecdotes that put a real human face on these statistics.
He has a lot of story.
Like, he talks about Dave, an electrician living in Florida. Dave works grueling manual labor hours and is forced by the courts to pay $3,000 a month in alimony and child support for children he is only permitted to see twice a year.
That's brutal.
It is. Meanwhile, Riker notes, Dave's ex-wife is using that extracted wealth to post vacation selfies from Bali.
Which just twists the knife.
Exactly. Then there's the story of John from Silicon Valley. John allegedly lost 60% of his tech salary, plus half the equity in a $750,000 home, over a claim of emotional abuse that stemmed from a verbal argument about doing laundry.
Just an argument over laundry.
That's what Riker claims. He stresses that there were no police reports, no history of physical violence, no hard evidence whatsoever. It was entirely her word against his, and the family court reflexively sided with her, stripping him of the assets he spent a decade building.
So the broader point Riker is making is that this erosion of evidentiary standards, this death of due process, isn't contained just to the family courts.
Right, it's everywhere.
He argues it has metastasized and fundamentally altered every single interaction between men and women in modern society.
He believes that mainstream feminism has initiated a sexual standoff.
A standoff where the foundational legal principle of innocent until proven guilty has been completely inverted for men.
They are now presumed guilty upon accusation.
Yes. And he points directly to the cultural shifts following the #MeToo movement and the rise of campus Title IX tribunal systems as the epicenter of this legal degradation.
Yeah, he does not hold back on universities here. He explicitly calls them feminist re-education camps.
Let's look at the mechanics of what he's talking about with Title IX, because he cites some very specific data pointing out a massive discrepancy.
Let's hear it.
The FBI estimates that roughly 1 in 10 campus sexual assault claims are provably false or fabricated.
Okay, 1 in 10.
However, he pulls data from the Cato Institute, revealing that accused men facing campus tribunals face a 90% expulsion rate, regardless of the physical evidence or lack thereof.
90%. So almost everyone accused is expelled. How does that happen legally?
The mechanism driving this, which Riker critiques heavily, is the evidentiary standard used in these tribunals.
Right.
In a criminal court, a person must be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But in these campus proceedings, the standard was lowered to a preponderance of the evidence.
Which means what exactly?
It essentially means it is merely 51% likely that an event occurred.
Wow. Just a coin flip, basically?
A coin flip. Riker argues that this incredibly low bar combined with tribunals staffed by ideological administrators rather than impartial judges, means these hearings aren't about discovering the truth or administering justice.
What are they about then?
They are about university public relations, ideological enforcement, and demonstrating a zero-tolerance policy at the absolute expense of young men's futures.
And he provides a terrifying example of this system in action. He brings up the case of a male philosophy major at UC Berkeley who was expelled following a Title IX complaint from an ex-girlfriend.
The shocking part of this is the supposed evidence.
Right. During the tribunal, the accused student produced text messages showing his ex-girlfriend actively bragging to her friends about how she was going to fabricate the claims to, quote-unquote, take him down because she was angry about the breakup.
She put it in writing.
In writing. Even with this explicit, written, exculpatory evidence showing clear malicious intent and fabrication on the part of the accuser, the university tribunal still chose to expel the male student.
Riker uses that anecdote to prove that the truth is just irrelevant in these spaces. The only thing that matters is the hierarchy of victimhood.
And then, to cement his argument about the lack of consequences for false accusations, he brings up the infamous 2014 Rolling Stone article, A Rape on Campus.
Oh, that was a massive story.
For listeners who don't remember, this was a huge cultural event. A student named Jackie Coakley alleged a horrific systemic gang rape at a University of Virginia fraternity.
The fallout was immediate.
Immediate and explosive. The fraternity was universally condemned, the house was physically vandalized and firebombed, and the lives of the men in that fraternity were put on hold. But a subsequent police investigation and a review by the Columbia School of Journalism revealed that the entire story was a complete fabrication.
Completely made up.
Rolling Stone eventually had to pay a $1.65 million settlement for defamation.
But Riker doesn't focus on the financial settlement, does he?
No. He focuses on the sociological aftermath for the accuser.
Right.
He points out that despite inventing a story that nearly destroyed multiple men's lives and incited actual violence, Jackie Coakley faced no criminal perjury charges.
Zero consequences.
Instead, he notes that she eventually rebranded herself online as a survivor advocate and amassed 48,000 followers on Instagram.
Wow.
Riker's core thesis here is that society has created a zero-risk incentive structure for women to destroy men. There are no legal consequences for false allegations, and in many cases, women are actually rewarded with social currency, sympathy, and platform growth.
So, hearing all of this, if the author paints the legal and social system as being this entirely rigged, incredibly dangerous minefield where a single accusation can strip you of your wealth, your education, and your freedom, what is his actual actionable survival strategy? How is a man supposed to date, network, or even just exist in a modern corporate office without stepping on a landmine?
That is the big question.
Riker's survival strategy is one of extreme, uncompromising caution and defensive posture.
Okay.
He advocates for the adoption of what he calls the Mike Pence 4D chess rule.
The Mike Pence rule.
Listeners will likely remember the cultural uproar a few years ago when it was revealed that the former vice president maintained a strict personal rule of never dining alone with a woman who was not his wife.
Yeah, the media completely mocked it.
They mocked it as archaic and puritanical. But Riker says it wasn't old-fashioned. It was a stroke of modern tactical brilliance.
Tactical brilliance. So he wants guys doing this.
He advises his readers to adopt this immediately. Never be alone in a room with a female coworker. Never travel alone with a female colleague.
It's a completely adversarial mindset, and he takes it even further than just avoiding dinners, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He tells his readers they must assume every friendly smile in the office is a future subpoena.
A future subpoena. That is a direct quote.
He demands men operate as if they are constantly under surveillance by a hostile entity. He tells men to record every interaction if they live in a one-party consent state.
Keep an immaculate paper trail of every email and Slack message.
And for men who are still attempting to date, he details a protocol that sounds like a legal deposition.
It really does. What's the acronym?
He advises men to text an acronym, CONSENT, CONFIRMED, to their date, and then take screenshots of that confirmation and send it to 3 trusted male witnesses before they even hold hands or escalate physical intimacy.
That is intense.
He openly admits that this kills the romance, but he argues that romance is already dead in the modern era. It has simply been replaced by legal liability, and men must lawyer up their personal lives accordingly.
If the legal and dating landscapes are this perilous, this rigged, how is a man supposed to educate himself on these threats if traditional universities are, as Riker claims, completely compromised.
Which brings us to the battlefield of the mind.
Brokers dedicates a massive portion of the book to contrasting the red pill reading list with what he derisively calls the grievance studies echo chamber.
Grievance studies, that's pretty pointed.
Very pointed. This section is a blistering, systematic critique of the modern higher education complex. Riker's thesis is that universities ceased to be places of objective learning decades ago.
He argues they have been entirely captured, from the administration down to the curriculum, by Marxist and feminist ideologies.
Right. They're no longer producing knowledge. They are factories producing what he calls grievance.
And he trains his sites directly on gender studies and sociology departments.
He does. And he doesn't just attack their theories, he attacks their academic legitimacy.
What's his data there?
He claims that 72% of all peer-reviewed gender studies papers are never cited by anyone outside of their own specific academic echo chamber.
72%? That's wild.
He's essentially calling it a fake discipline, a self-sustaining loop of ideological validation that has no bearing on reality or objective science.
And he backs this critique up by pointing to data from Open Secrets. He claims that 89% of faculty in these departments donate exclusively to far-left political candidates.
Right. So for Riker, these individuals aren't objective professors seeking truth.
What are they?
They are political operatives cloaked in the protection of academic tenure.
And he emphasizes the real-world zero-sum consequences of this ideological capture. It's not just about what they are teaching, it's about what they are displacing.
He highlights a highly controversial anecdote from UCLA for this.
The math thing.
Yes, claiming that the university actively slashed the budgets for STEM departments. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the fields that actually build infrastructure and advance civilization, specifically to reallocate those funds to a new decolonizing math course.
Decolonizing math. Riker views this as a suicidal cultural move. It is the literal dismantling of hard, productive, objective knowledge in favor of ideological word salad that produces nothing of tangible value.
To combat this institutional rot, Riker urges men to completely overhaul their relationship with information.
He tells them to treat their reading habits not as leisure, not as a way to unwind before bed, but as tactical preparation for an ongoing cultural war.
He says men need to curate a personal library of weapons, not handcuffs.
The mechanics of how he views the information diet are genuinely fascinating. Reading is a literal battlefield for the mind.
He leverages U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data, claiming that men who read 10 or more books a year out-earn their non-reading peers by 21%.
Because reading builds cognitive moats. It builds focus, vocabulary, and strategic thinking. But Riker argues that it's not just about reading anything.
Right.
Consuming the wrong information is worse than not reading at all. It is about deliberately selecting what you allow into your brain.
Exactly. He provides a very specific, uncompromising red pill reading list.
What's on it?
He wants men reading Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics to understand emotional control and resilience in the face of chaos. He demands they read Ayn Rand to embrace unapologetic self-interest and the morality of capitalism.
Okay, classic red pill stuff.
He points to Sun Tzu's The Art of War for understanding leverage and strategy. He includes Winston Churchill for lessons on stubborn imperial leadership and refusing to surrender to hostile forces.
And he specifically mandates Rollo Tomasi's The Rational Male, which is widely considered a foundational, almost canonical text in the manosphere for understanding intersexual dynamics.
But just as importantly, and this is where his philosophy becomes highly controversial, he provides a list of books to actively burn or completely avoid.
He explicitly targets Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, anything written by second-wave feminist Gloria Steinem, the economic theories of Karl Marx, and the deconstructionist philosophy of the French intellectual Michel Foucault.
He views these texts not as differing opinions to be debated, but as radioactive to woke sensibilities. He believes they are structurally designed to induce guilt, passivity, and self-doubt in men, and are entirely destructive to a masculine mindset.
He shares a story to illustrate the ROI, the return on investment, of violently rejecting this literature.
The story about Dave.
Yeah, another Dave. He talks about a Silicon Valley software engineer named Dave. Dave was reportedly feeling completely bogged down by corporate diversity initiatives and guilt-based HR trainings.
According to the book, Dave took his corporate-issued copy of White Fragility, threw it in an actual bonfire in his backyard, and replaced it on his desk with Ayn Rand's the virtue of selfishness.
An actual bonfire. And the result.
Riker says Dave opted out of every single corporate diversity committee, refused to apologize for his success, focused entirely on optimizing his code and building his own value, and ended up doubling his income within 2 years by jumping to a competitor that only valued merit.
So the underlying logic Riker is pushing with that story is that progressive literature is an operational hazard. It is designed to make men apologize for their biological drive.
Classical and libertarian literature, conversely, is designed to induce action, competence, and unapologetic ambition.
He drives this home with another story about a college student who is sitting in a sociology lecture.
Oh, this one is telling.
The student simply raised his hand and asked a logical, mechanical question. He said, "Professor, if gender is entirely fluid and a social construct, why do I receive mandatory detention for misgendering someone? How can I be punished for misidentifying something that doesn't have a fixed reality?"
It's a fair logical question.
And what happened to the student?
Riker notes that the student wasn't engaged in a debate. He was immediately escorted out of the lecture hall by campus security for creating an unsafe environment.
Riker uses this anecdote to prove that these academic institutions and the ideologies they push cannot withstand even basic, polite, logical scrutiny.
They rely entirely on censorship, intimidation, and the threat of expulsion to maintain their fragile power.
But let me push back on this on behalf of the listener because there seems to be a glaring contradiction here.
Sure, go ahead.
The author is constantly demanding that men read classic thinkers. He demands that they value logic, that they argue the science, that they be ruthless in their pursuit of the truth. But in the exact same breath, he is explicitly advocating for burning progressive books and refusing to engage with modern sociology.
Right.
Isn't he just telling his readers to build a different kind of echo chamber? If you only read Ayn Rand and Sun Tzu and you completely refuse to understand the arguments of Michel Foucault or modern feminists, aren't you just as bubbled off, just as ideologically fragile as the gender studies majors he is ruthlessly mocking?
That is the most obvious and potent critique of his methodology. But Riker justifies this stance by changing the framework of the argument.
How so?
He doesn't view this as an academic debate taking place in a neutral marketplace of ideas. He frames it as a matter of psychological survival.
Psychological survival.
He calls this intellectual isolation a tactical retreat and a form of mental Darwinism.
How does he justify the censorship aspect, though?
His argument relies on a biological metaphor. He asks his readers, "You wouldn't invite a known parasite into your physical home just to hear its perspective on digestion, would you?"
No, you wouldn't.
No, you would exterminate it. Riker views progressive ideology not as a competing intellectual idea, but as a literal mind virus, a psychological pathogen specifically engineered to weaken male resolve.
So it's a quarantine.
Therefore, shutting it out isn't censorship, it's establishing a necessary mental quarantine. He believes men must guard the gates of their minds with absolute, unforgiving ruthlessness if they have any hope of escaping the doom loop. Entertaining ideas designed to destroy you is, in his view, a luxury weak men can no longer afford.
That is an incredibly harsh, zero-tolerance perspective on information. And that ruthlessness transitions perfectly into how he views the physical world and the economy.
It does.
Because for Riker, guarding your mind is only step one. It's theoretical. The practical application requires you to harden your physical body and your bank account to become truly untouchable by the system.
This brings us to the core of his practical advice, where his philosophy becomes intensely physical.
He operates on a very simple binary maxim:
Lift or perish.
lift or perish. Riker draws a direct causal correlation between physical strength, muscle mass, and personal, even corporate success.
And he actually puts a number on it. He claims that men who train heavily enough to squat double their own body weight earn 22% more over their lifetimes than men who do not lift.
I mean, he literally writes, "Progress picks Trump PowerPoints." Think about the mechanics of that claim for a second. He is arguing that the boardroom is not a purely intellectual space.
He talks about a Wall Street trader who closed a massive $10 million acquisition deal right after hitting a personal record on the deadlift.
Why?
Because, as the trader told Riker, the clients can subconsciously hear the heavyweight plates clanking when he walks in the room and shakes their hand.
It's this idea that primal intimidation, biological markers of competence and physical capability, still dictate human interaction just beneath the surface of the modern civilized boardroom.
If we pull back and connect this physical imperative to his broader systemic critique, Riker is arguing that the modern world functions as what he calls a gynocratic plantation.
Gynocratic plantation.
He views society as a massive bureaucratic system designed to extract a man's labor, tax his income, and utilize his output, while aggressively denying him any cultural authority or respect.
In his view, the only genuine escape from this plantation is through absolute physical and financial self-reliance. Muscle mass is presented not just as health, but as an untaxable, uncancelable currency.
You cannot borrow it, and the state cannot seize it.
And the example he uses to prove this point is wild. He bypasses corporate America entirely and looks at the prison system.
The prison yard.
He calls the state penitentiary yard Earth's last functioning meritocracy.
He cites data noting that inmates who dedicate their time to lifting heavy weights and building significant muscle mass actually serve sentences that are, on average, 24% shorter than their cellmates who do not train.
The mechanism behind that statistic is fascinating. Why would a parole board let a stronger, potentially more dangerous man out early?
Riker argues that the parole board, even subconsciously, looks at the sheer physical discipline required to build that kind of muscle in a high-stress environment, and they equate that physical discipline with behavioral rehabilitation.
He highlights a specific guy named Iron Joe Garcia to illustrate this.
Iron Joe.
Joe was serving a 10-year bid for armed robbery. Instead of joining gangs or wasting time, Joe turned his cell into a hyper-focused fitness environment and eventually built a massive fitness empire upon release.
The parole board granted him early release because they looked at his forearms, which Riker notes were thicker than the guard's riot gear, and they realized this man had fundamentally rewired his brain.
He had learned absolute, undeniable discipline. Riker says that while progressive prison activists are lobbying to get yoga mats, art therapy, and stress balls into maximum security prisons, it's the heavy iron that actually rehabilitates and saves these men.
Hard reality cures criminal chaos.
And that philosophy of embracing hard, undeniable reality transfers directly into his views on personal finance and wealth accumulation.
Riker aggressively attacks the traditional financial path that middle-class men are taught to follow.
He attacks the concept of fiat currency, arguing it is constantly being devalued by central banks. He attacks the Federal Reserve, and he specifically, mathematically, mocks the concept of the traditional 401k retirement account.
Let's do the math on that, because his teardown of the 401k is a core part of his argument.
Let's do it.
He points out that financial advisors promise an average 7% annual return in the stock market. But, he argues, when you subtract a realistic 4% for true inflation and cost of living increases, it leaves a man with a pathetic 3% real gain.
And for what? For 40 years of sitting in a cubicle, dealing with HR departments, and enduring wage slavery.
He calls traditional saving and passive index fund investing a beta buck strategy designed to keep men docile and dependent on the corporate system until they are too old to enjoy the money.
Instead of that slow, dependent grind, he preaches a philosophy of financial dominance.
Financial dominance. He tells men they need to aggressively move their wealth out of the mainstream banking system and into hard, untraceable, or highly defendable assets.
He's talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, which cannot be inflated by a government. He's talking about physical real estate and raw land.
And he's talking about owning physical, censorship-resistant businesses. He specifically mentions skills like CNC machining or 3D printing rifle components, things that exist in the physical world and hold intrinsic value.
The ultimate goal here isn't just getting rich. It's about creating a financial fortress that the state, a malicious HR department, or a vindictive ex-wife and family court absolutely cannot touch.
He shares the story of a divorced dad who got completely sick of the doom loop.
Oh, this story is great.
This guy was tired of having his wages garnished for exorbitant alimony payments.
Oh, what did you do?
He legally liquidated his mainstream life.
He traded his corporate salary and alimony obligations for a cash purchase of a beat-up RV and a massive array of solar panels on a cheap plot of off-grid land in Montana.
And how did the system react to that?
The family court judge called it a reckless, irresponsible financial decision because it lowered his taxable income to near zero.
But Riker says the man's children now visit him in Montana and view him as a king. A sovereign man who can hunt elk, fix engines, and survive completely off the grid, rather than viewing him as a defeated, court-mandated ATM living in a sad apartment.
He traded mainstream financial approval for actual sovereignty.
He provides another financial anecdote that attacks a different modern trap. He talks about a 24-year-old gamer living in Texas.
The crypto kid.
Yes. Everyone in this kid's life, his parents, traditional financial advisors, told him to take his savings, put it into a Vanguard S&P 500 index fund, and get a safe corporate job.
Instead, the kid ignored all of them and used his capital to turn his gaming PC setup into a massive, heavily cooled $4 million crypto mining farm.
Riker uses this to make a very specific, aggressive point attacking the modern gig economy.
Yep.
He absolutely despises companies like Uber, DoorDash, or Deliveroo. He calls it gig economy nonsense.
Why the intense hatred for the gig economy? A lot of people see that as a hustle.
Because mathematically and structurally, driving an Uber does not build equity. It does not build a moat around your life.
You don't own the algorithm.
You don't own the algorithm, you don't own the customer data, and your vehicle is depreciating with every mile. Riker views the gig economy as just a digitized, modern form of wage slavery, completely dependent on the whims of a corporate algorithm that can deactivate you with a single click.
He wants men building real physical businesses and holding real appreciating assets. He wants them acting like owners, not independent contractors begging for tips.
Which brings this entirely back to you, the listener. If you're tuning into this, take a hard, honest look at where you are spending your most valuable asset, your time.
Riker cites a devastating statistic from Pew Research claiming that 68% of men under the age of 35 are currently wasting 3 or more hours a day scrolling mindlessly on platforms like TikTok or Instagram.
Are you part of that 68%? Or are you actively building your hustle hierarchy in the stolen moments of your day?
Are you listening to podcasts about underwriting commercial real estate during your bathroom breaks at your mundane data entry job? Riker's message here is stark. Your time is live ammunition. Stop firing it at digital distractions that bleed your cash and energy.
And once a man has secured his mind from progressive ideology, hardened his body in the gym, and fortified his finances in hard assets, Riker argues there is one final, structurally crucial step to permanently escaping the doom loop.
You cannot do it alone. And that brings us to his analysis of brotherhoods, the crisis of fatherless nations, and the biological imperative of legacy.
This is where the book pulls back from individual tactics and looks at the macro level of how society is actually built and maintained.
Riker argues that historically, all real, lasting, paradigm-shifting power was incubated and built inside exclusive, highly guarded male spaces.
He points to a specific historical nexus, the year 1717 in London. He notes that 4 local pubs in London bricked the foundational lodges of the Freemasonry movement.
The mechanics of what happened next are what Riker wants the reader to focus on. It wasn't just men drinking ale.
He notes that the men who formed those exclusive, high-trust fraternal lodges went on to essentially architect the modern world. They designed and funded 73% of Europe's scientific academies.
Decades later, the networks built in those lodges proved the capital and engineering expertise to fund the construction of the Panama Canal.
Riker is illustrating the raw, world-altering power of high-trust, exclusive male networks that operate outside of public view.
And he contrasts those historical engines of monumental progress with the current crippling crisis of modern male isolation. Riker warns his readers about what he calls the loneliness tax.
It is a biological reality. He cites a Harvard medical study showing that men who have at least 3 close, reliable friends have 22% lower baseline cortisol levels.
Their biological stress is literally measurably lower because they have a tribe.
But he is extremely, almost aggressively particular about what kind of friends men actually need to lower that cortisol and build power.
He draws a sharp contrast between historical brotherhoods, think Viking raiding parties navigating the North Sea, or Spartan phalanxes holding a shield wall with modern attempts at male connection, like what he mocks as male ally workshops.
He is brutal about this. He literally writes that a soul cycle class full of women crying through positive affirmations might work perfectly for female psychology, but men do not bond over forced vulnerability.
Men, he argues, thrive and bond almost exclusively through shared physical struggle and the overcoming of obstacles.
He claims that 70% of modern male empowerment groups that focus only on sitting in a circle, talking about feelings, and expressing vulnerability collapse within a year because they lack a physical challenge. They lack a dragon to slay.
This raises a fundamental question about what Riker believes actually constitutes a functional brotherhood. For him, it's not about finding a safe space for emotional support. It's about forming what he terms alpha social circles.
He argues that real power, the kind that protects you from the doom loop, isn't found by networking on LinkedIn, sending cringy, desperate DMs to corporate recruiters, or collecting hundreds of weak transactional connections.
Real power is trading high-level secrets, swapping survival currencies, and operating with the loyalty and ruthlessness of a pack of wolves.
He brings up a specific real-world example of this. He talks about an underground wilderness group operating in Texas that runs what they explicitly call no estrogen allowed survival trips for men.
They take guys out into the deep brush, they strip away their phones, they force them to build daily campfires from scratch, which Riker, hilariously but seriously, notes actually raises a man's leadership scores by 47% upon returning to the office, according to an evolutionary psychology paper he cites.
They rebuild diesel engines in complete silence. They don't talk about their childhood trauma, they fix mechanical problems and survive the illness together.
He also highlights an individual named Jake to show how this networking operates on a micro level.
Jake was living a soft, modern life. According to the book, he stopped eating his anxiety-reducing CBD gummies, quit his comfortable email job life, and took up a physically demanding blacksmithing apprenticeship.
Because Jake learned a hard physical skill, he entered a new economy. He now barters his custom knife-making skills with an ex-Marine in exchange for high-level carpentry and home defense lessons.
Riker says that is how real men network. They don't trade business cards, they trade tangible survival value.
And underlying all of this, the brotherhoods, the finances, the physical strength, is a deep, almost existential anxiety about legacy and what Riker terms the sterility crisis.
Riker looks at the demographic data and points out the devastating, undeniable statistics regarding fatherlessness in modern society.
He notes that a staggering 80% of all prison inmates in the United States grew up without a father in the home.
He views this not as an accident, but as the ultimate predictable failure of a society that is demonized masculinity. The doom loop produces broken boys who inevitably grow up to become destructive, chaotic men.
He contrasts this modern demographic failure with the ultimate historical archetype of male legacy, Genghis Khan.
Now, putting aside the obvious brutality of the Mongol conquests, Riker points out the biological reality that Genghis Khan has roughly 16 million living descendants today.
Riker argues that in the grand calculus of evolution, testosterone and sperm are humanity's ultimate undeniable currencies.
He cites fascinating data from the National Institutes of Health, claiming that religious traditional men who have 3 or more children actually outlive childless, atheist, what he calls soy-jack males by an average of half a decade.
His point with that data is that embracing traditional, demanding masculine roles, leading a household, providing resources, facing the stress of fathering a large family, isn't a burden that breaks a man down.
It is literally biologically protective. It gives a man a reason to live, a reason to fight, and a legacy that outlasts the collapse of any empire or corporate structure.
Listening to this entire breakdown, synthesizing all these points, it sounds like he views mainstream modern culture, the universities, corporate America, the traditional family court system, like a crumbling, heavily manipulated stock market that is totally rigged against the retail investor.
That is a great analogy.
And his message to men is basically, pull all of your social, emotional, and financial capital out of these public institutions immediately.
Yeah.
Take the early withdrawal penalty, get out while you still can, and reinvest every ounce of your energy into underground, high-yield, fraternal, dark pools.
He wants men operating entirely off the grid of mainstream approval.
That is an incredibly accurate structural synthesis of his war manual. If we connect all the dots we've discussed today, Riker's roadmap for men to exit the doom loop is harsh, it is entirely unapologetic, and it requires immense discipline. He is telling men to reclaim their physical sovereignty by building undeniable strength in the gym. He is telling them to reclaim their financial sovereignty by exiting fiat currency and hoarding crypto and hard assets.
Yeah, and he is telling them to reclaim their social dominance by abandoning public institutions and building exclusive, ruthless brotherhoods.
He is advocating for a complete systemic detachment from the systems he believes are structurally designed to farm men for their resources.
Which leads me to a final, highly provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap this up.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is something that Riker doesn't explicitly answer in the text, but it is the logical endpoint of his philosophy. Think about this. If this book is wildly successful, if millions of capable, intelligent, driven men actually follow this blueprint,
If they completely detach from mainstream corporate America, drop out of modern universities, refuse to participate in traditional marriage or family courts, and instead spend their time building these well-armed, crypto-funded, hyper-masculine parallel societies, what happens to the infrastructure of the mainstream society they leave behind?
that is a fascinating question.
Does that society simply collapse under its own bureaucratic weight without the male labor, the engineering expertise, and the tax dollars required to prop it up? Or does it trigger an even larger, more aggressive cultural Cold War between the sovereign men who opted out and a desperate state apparatus that wants them forced back into the system?
It is a fascinating, complex, and slightly terrifying premise to consider.
It certainly is a question that extends far beyond the pages of the book, and one that gets to the heart of where our culture might be heading in the next decade.
And if you want to explore the pages of that book yourself, to see the raw data and the uncompromising arguments we discussed today, I highly encourage you to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to purchase Escaping the Doom Loop today.
Dive into the full text, see these arguments in their original context, and judge them for yourself. And remember to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack for more of his unfiltered, ongoing content.
Finally, to our audience, please hit that like button and subscribe to the deep dive.
We rely entirely on your support to keep these in-depth, impartial explorations going, so you never miss a breakdown of the most fascinating, controversial, and vital texts shaping our world today. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.